Greetings, everyone. It is the Sabbath on March 7th, and we are in Matthew 8, and we'll be continuing in Matthew 8, and going over a lot of things that are not maybe as put together. The topics are going to vary a little bit from here on until we get to sections where there's a lot about a single thing. So let's just go ahead and begin in Matthew 8 and verse 1. When he was come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And you've got to stop for a second and uh, ask yourself about the multitudes. So, when Christ was standing there and there were multitudes following him around, 7,000, 5,000, however many thousand people that were walking around watching him, uh, and trying to be part of the scenery around what he was doing. There was absolutely no mistaking the fact that he was doing things that people did not see on a regular basis. When you consider that multitudes followed him around a lot, and that those people were taking time away from their work, away from their lives, away from everything that they were doing, and they were following this guy around, there was a reason they were doing that. This was a big deal. And it's not a joke when 7,000 people follow you around. It's just not. And if you ever have 7,000 people following you around, you will probably find that it's quite uncomfortable. It's difficult when you have a large family and you're all trailing around on city streets and whatnot together, and to have 7,000 people trying to get as close as they can to you. That's not very comfortable. It's difficult, and it's problematic. So, and there were no porta potties back then. So where were all these people pooping? Where were they peeing? What were they eating? I mean, the logistics of this in a time when there were no sewage systems alone is pretty okay. We got to think about this for a minute. How often does somebody poop when there are 7,000 people around? So they were having a dramatic effect not only on the Messiah and the apostles, but on everything around wherever the Messiah went. It was kind of disruptive uh, wherever they went. So be aware of what's going on, the noise, the everything that's going on when you have 7,000 people trying to get as close to one person as they can get. It's difficult. So when you see these parts where, Christ says, don't tell anybody, he's doing that, in part because he doesn't want to be mobbed. There's a lot of different things going on with why he said that. Don't get me wrong, but one of the reasons is just not to get mobbed to the point he was, unable to even move. And I'm not saying that he could go wherever he wanted. He could disappear in front of them if he needed to, and end up being somewhere else. But the you just feel the flavor of what it's like to have 7,000 people mobbing you, and it's not terribly pleasant. So the great multitudes followed him, and and behold, there came a leper and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And again, how does this guy get in front of the Messiah with 7,000 people trying to get close to him? It's difficult. He had to find a spot and wiggle his way in there, or he had to just get lucky and be in front of him when the Messiah went a particular direction, or the Messiah, by the Spirit, went to that location. Saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And Jesus put forth his hand and touched him, saying, I will. Be you clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said unto him, see that you tell no man, but go your way and show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. So Hmm. Maybe he got to the Messiah at a point where there were not lots of people around him, as it seems in this case, because it says, "Tell no man." But know that it's a big deal when the Messiah heals anyone. At the time, it was a big deal. And he healed people right, left, and center over and over and over. And everybody knew that whenever he went anywhere and healed somebody, it was likely to occur again. And everybody wanted to see this. They wanted to see these people be healed. And a lot of them wanted to be healed themselves. And if you look around in the world around you today, this does not occur anywhere in the world. You know, people say, "Oh, well, he was healed." Da, 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 da. Oh, okay. That's all I have to say is okay. Maybe God healed someone, but the fact is that Babylon, America, has gotten to the point where God's not willing to do much of that kind of thing. I have been personally healed when I was a child. I have been personally healed by God where it was like night and day. Just from one moment I was sick as a dog, and the next moment I was just fine. And I know that this can occur. I know that it has occurred, but it doesn't occur very much at all now. Our society has deteriorated to the point where God's not willing to do much of anything because he's going to destroy this place and most of the people in it. So when we look at this circumstance where the Messiah is doing these things and healing people right and left in the past, and we look at our circumstance now and our circumstance into the future, and it's not going to be like this. And I guess the most important thing that I want to get across here is that God's not doing this work now. This was a work that was done in the past, and it was done specifically because our Messiah came to save the whole world. He won't save the whole world, but he came to save the whole world. And I say he won't save the whole world because we won't allow ourselves to all be saved. Wide is the gate to destruction, and many there be that go in thereat. What we read in Matthew 7. Narrow is the gate, and strait, and few there be that enter into life. And he came to save the whole earth, and he gave the possibility of that to every single person. But most people won't choose it. He did not come to punish the world at that time. He did not come to change anything except to save the world by his death, by his sacrifice. And he didn't loudly complain at anyone except for the Pharisees. He made a lot of prophecies about the future and about the time when he would come in his anger. But at the time he came to save as many people as he could possibly save and functionally save the whole world. So when we get down to this point where we're looking at this and thinking, man, it'd be nice if that was where we're at now, I'm here to tell you it's not going to happen. Because the Messiah himself very, very clearly said that there shall be no sign given except the sign of Jonah the prophet in the end time. And the sign of Jonah the prophet is not helpful. It's just not helpful to anyone who wants a sign. Why? The sign of Jonah the prophet is 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a beast. That's what the sign of Jonah the prophet is. And that's what we're going to get. 42 months in the belly of the beast. As a sign, it's not terribly helpful compared to, healings and all the various different things that the Messiah did, raising people from the dead, doing all kinds of wonderful works that had never been seen on the planet before. People had been healed, but not in the way the Messiah did, and not to the extent that they had done it, and certainly not raised from the dead. What's important about verse 4? Let's read it again. And Jesus said unto him, See, you tell no man, but go your way and show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them. Seems like strange language a little bit, doesn't it? What is a testimony to someone else? A testimony is a witness to someone else of a particular thing. And the Messiah is very clearly saying, hey, I saved you. Now you need to go tell them, all of them, everybody, by doing what you were supposed to do under the law, according to the law, and show yourself to the priest that you are clean. You no longer have a horrible disease that's fatal eventually, and do what was spoken of in the law according to something like this. And this is important because why? Why is it important that this man followed the specifics of the law so that he would be a witness to everyone around there? It's because there was nothing wrong with the Mosaic law. There was nothing wrong with it. Whose law was it? It wasn't Moses' law, it was God's law. But what was the point? The point was the Messiah himself healed the man. And that healing was then acknowledged by those who were running the temple and those who were in the position of power at that time. Now, I'm not going to argue for or against whatever whether this is the old or the new covenant or whatever. There's a lot going on there, and if you don't understand how the new covenant and the old covenant interact in their different ways, then that's a whole big discussion that that needs to be gone through, but not here. But the point is that this is a moment when the new and the old covenant overlapped, and the witness specifically was there to show where the miracle came from and put it in the context of everything that had been done in society for the last 1,500 years. Well, it hadn't been that long, maybe. Yeah, close to 1,500 years. So there's something going on here that we'll examine more as we go through Matthew, but the realities of the circumstance are that most of the people, whether they were Christian or whether they were Jews at that point, their behavior was largely the same. Their behavior was largely the same. And they went to the temple and did everything that they were supposed to do at the temple. And yet, something bigger was pushing those things from behind, from in front, from above and from below and from everywhere. The Messiah's influence started to take a bigger role in the wider society, and everybody's behavior was still largely the same. They still followed God's laws almost completely from beginning to end. And most people don't really realize how these people were the same people. What was the difference between the Christians and the Jews at this point? Or the Israelites, however you want to, say it. There was no difference. It was just some people believed who this Jesus guy was, and a lot of people didn't. But they had the same behavior. And they were doing the same things in the temple for their religion daily. Were there problems? Were there hypocrites? Were there different sects of people doing the wrong things? Yeah, there were. But everything functioned largely as it had been functioning for the last 1,500 years. There was very little difference between Solomon and now, at that time. So know that there were some interesting things that were happening that most people don't really recognize on the surface. We now have separated the Christians and the Jews to the point where we're not doing the same things at all. And honestly, Christianity should be blamed for a lot of that, because the Sabbath is when God rested after creating the earth. That was way before Moses or anybody else. And when God instituted all of the law with Moses, and he instituted the holy days, and he instituted all these various things, there was never a point at which God decided that we should do Christmas and Easter and Halloween instead of these things. So really, Christianity is to be blamed, which is sad, it's sick, and horrible, and we'll talk about that more later. So let's continue on. Verse 5 of chapter 8. When Jesus was entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion beseeching him, and saying, Lord, my servant lies at home sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. And Jesus said unto him, I will come and heal him. And the centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. For I am a man under authority, having soldiers under me, and I say to this man, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard it, he marveled and said unto them that followed, Verily I say unto you, I have not found so great a faith, no, not in Israel. This man had great faith. And when you consider that statement, that he had not found anybody that had that great a faith in all of Israel, that's pretty scary for God's people. But it does outline and illustrate very clearly a basic principle, that faith is actual belief and knowing that something is going to be done, regardless of the circumstance. Having faith is knowing that something will be done, believing God to the point that you know that something will occur. And this is important. This is really important, because most people don't use their faith in this way. They don't say, okay, God said he's going to do this, I'm just going to believe it. And not ever revisit that. And this is how we need to become about our Bibles. Because when God says he's going to do something, he does it. Whether our faith is engaged or not, he does what he says he's going to do. And if our faith doesn't get engaged, then what happens? Usually what happens is we're on the wrong side of whatever it is that God does. And that means we get punished. And there is sin. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin. And sin gets punished with death. So we need to be really conscious and careful of what we say and how we say it and what we believe. You can say, oh, well, I believe in God. I believe in God. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So you believe in God. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Do you believe what he says? When he says something, do you believe it? When God says, as I live, I will kill you if you do this, insert Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Isaiah, do you believe him? And most people don't. They don't even come close to actually believing that. Oh, well, that was... Mostly they'll just skirt around it, skip it, distract, do something else. This issue of faith is the most important issue there is. There is nothing else more important than this. By faith, we are saved. By faith, everything happens on this planet in a good way. And modern day Christianity is just lacking. They're just lacking. Faith is not well shown in the modern church. It's just not. I should say church is, because it's not just one church. When Jesus heard this man, he marveled and said unto them, Verily I say unto you, I have not found so great a faith, no, not in Israel. And I say unto you, verse 11, that many shall come from the east and west, and shall sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. A lot of the Israelites are going to die. What does God get? 10%. He gets a tithe of Israel. I'm not entirely sure he gets a tithe of the whole world. He might. There's nothing that says it specifically anywhere. God gets a tithe. And that should scare you. Fear the Lord. It's the beginning of wisdom. The children of the kingdom shall be cast into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Who's that going to happen to? Hypocrites. People who say one thing and do another. Who give lip service to God and walk the other direction. How many people do that now in Christianity? Most everybody, unfortunately. We say one thing and then we go out and do all kinds of crazy things that should not be done. That God has said you will surely die if you do these things. And we don't believe him. Just like Adam and Eve didn't believe God when he said, if you eat of that tree, you will surely die. They believed Satan. He said, oh, well, you won't really die. But they died. And everybody else died until the Messiah, this man who's healing here, came to save us. And God said over and over, you need to behave like me. He's come down and talked to us over and over and over and told us what we have to do. He gave us the law so that we could see and that there was a penalty for death. And if you followed the law, you could see what life was and how you should behave. But we've ignored that. Modern Christianity, we've just pitched the law out, which is the stupidest thing we could have ever possibly done. You know, you're supposed to keep your eye on the ball. Well, when somebody's carrying a sword around you, you should be conscious of where that sword is. And we've just said, oh, well, it doesn't even exist. That's just garbage. And God said, no. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Most people don't believe this scripture. All I have to do is accept Jesus and say his name, and you're born again and you'll be saved. And okay. Go back to the last chapter where it said, you know, not all that say unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom. People have focused to the point of stupidity, utter stupidity, on the fact that God is love. God is love, and he's also angry. God has all the emotions that any other person has. He just has them perfectly at the perfect times for the perfect reasons. He's happy, he's sad. He's got way more than one dimension, which is what most people see him as. Hypocrisy is more prevalent now than it ever was in the New Testament times. How do you know that? Well, it's really easy, actually. There are approximately 100,000 churches in the United States teaching different things about God and saying it's all true. Our doctrines are true. Oh, those guys, they're all wrong. And there's 100,000 different churches. You need to read Ezekiel 34. You need to read Ezekiel 34 and believe it. Because God's not going to tolerate this much longer. He's not going to tolerate having more than one church. And he's going to break all the churches down, and he's going to take away the shepherds' jobs. And this is going to happen very soon. Don't think that it won't. The hypocrisy of all of these people saying that we have all the true doctrines of Christ, and what? Lying about it, right, left, and center, everywhere. People are lying about God and collecting money and doing all kinds of crazy things that they should not be doing. And God's done with it. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast out into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Who do you think he's talking about here? Oh, that was the Jews. No. Oh, no. God's people are the Israelites. And if you are a part of Israel, then you may enter the kingdom. If you're not part of Israel, you're not entering God's kingdom, period, under any circumstance. If you're not one of the children of the kingdom, then you have to be grafted into Israel to get into the kingdom. All of the children of Israel are not going to be killed. A lot of them are going to die because of their hypocrisy and because of their inability to believe God, to actually believe his words, and that he's serious about everything that he says. And Jesus said unto the centurion, verse 13, go your way, as you have believed, so be it done unto you. And his servant was healed in the selfsame hour. You see, the Messiah didn't have any problem with faith. His faith was absolutely rock solid. And he commanded that that man be healed, and he was healed by faith. We need to start paying attention to our faith and to what we believe. Many people have their faith misplaced completely, and they believe all kinds of strange things, odd, strange, bizarre things. And they put their faith behind all kinds of stuff that is not faithful. And this will end in sorrow and weeping and gnashing of teeth. Be very careful where you put your faith. If it's not behind God's words, if it's not centered on God and his words, then you're believing the wrong thing. And if you're listening to all of these churches out here with their 100,000s, millions of different doctrines conflicting, then you better be very, very careful. because those conflicting doctrines come from conflicting sources. And you got to ask yourself, who was there in Messiah's time? The Pharisees and the Sadducees were the two primary ones that everybody sees in the New Testament. These are sects. These are different church groups that believe different things about God. And God hates that. He hates it with a passion. These were the people God called the hypocrites. And you yourself are involved in this process. Because there are 100,000 different sects of Christianity, more or less. And you're in one. Almost without question or doubt. There are a few people who aren't. But most people are involved in following a man who interprets God for them. And that's not okay. That's not okay. You need to be in your Bible and looking at what God actually says and understanding that Bible. Line upon line, precept upon precept. And not going backwards and falling and being snared and taken. You see, you have to be sincere about learning who God is. You have to be sincere. You have to be earnest. You have to be childlike. About to sneeze, but I haven't. You have to be childlike, and you have to believe God like a little child. When a father tells his little child something, the child believes it, truly believes it, typically, unless there's been some problem. And that's a good thing. And that's how we should be with God. When he says something, we should believe it. And we should hold on to that thing, whatever it is, forever, as long as it's correct. If we learn it's not correct for some reason and that we've mistaken what we should be doing, then we need to change it immediately. And that's what everybody needs to do in Christianity right now. They need to change it immediately. Because when you read Ezekiel 34, and you know that the shepherds, the false prophets, are the ministers of God's churches, the people that God hates almost as much as anybody in this time, as much as anybody, maybe more than anybody, then you better watch out. So when we're talking about this, and we go back up to oh, my brain's not kicking it in right there. Oh, there it is. When he says, "Go your way and show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded for a testimony unto them," it's the same circumstance that we're in now. We have to offer our testimony, our understanding, our knowledge of who God is to the people around us. This man's testimony was that Jesus, the Messiah, Christ, is our Savior. And that it's okay to go ahead and do the things that were commanded by Moses. Because the guy standing here at the same time was the guy who commanded Moses and told him to tell everybody about these commands from God. The 2 tablets. The guy that handed them to Moses was this guy right here. Same fellow gave Moses the 10 commandments, and he's telling this guy to go and offer the gift as a testimony against them. Now, there's some things going on here that are not immediately obvious, but the realities of this circumstance are that the people who are in control of most people's religion, God doesn't like. He hates them. Whether it's Orthodoxy in the Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox and the Russian Orthodox and all these guys, or the ministry of all of the various little churches all over everywhere, God does not like them. And I'm not sorry if that offends you. People are offended by this. But to God, this is offensive. Why? Read Ezekiel 34, and you'll see why God's angry. You'll see why he's pissed. And he's not just angry at the shepherds, he's angry at the people because everybody has willingly colluded with these men about this. We want to hear your lies. When you look at the people of God, all the churches in Christianity, everybody has said, oh, yeah, please tell us some lies because we don't want to hear all this tough stuff. And it follows through, right through to what the Messiah is saying all the way through. He was our greatest prophet. And we don't give him any credit, really, for being a prophet. The testimony of Jesus Christ is the spirit of prophecy. And if you don't get that, you don't understand that at a gut level, then you don't have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Because the spirit of prophecy, of what's going to happen in the future, that's why he came. He came to save the whole world and to tell us what was going to happen. In the end time. And he didn't quench the smoking flax. He didn't harm anyone when he was here. But he told us that things were going to go south later if we didn't follow his ways. Go back to chapter 7. You know, this man builds his house on the rock. This man builds his house on the sand. The rains are going to come. The storm's going to happen. Chapter 8, verse 14. And when Jesus was come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother laid and sick of a fever. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and ministered unto them, or served them food, whatever it was they needed. That healing happened instantaneously. Most people don't understand what happens when someone is healed. Really important that you understand the process and what occurs when someone is healed. Why is it important that you understand that process? Because if you don't understand that process, you don't know why you're not healed. So the Messiah himself had power. Really strong, obvious power. Everybody knew it. Wow, he can heal anybody anytime he wants. What did everybody say whenever they came to be healed? If you will, I will be healed. If you choose to heal me, I will be healed. You hear it, see it over and over and over throughout all the accounts. They knew that it was God's will that was important. In this case, the Messiah standing there could heal at will. And everybody recognized that. If you will, I will be healed. Why is that important? Because there's a process going on behind being healed. What's that process? It's actually really simple. All sickness is because of sin. All sickness is because of sin. Now, there are reasons why people are sick, not because of sin, but in the end, all sickness is because of sin. And you can see that really obviously if you just look at Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve would have lived in paradise forever, and they would have never been sick. And as long as they ate of the tree of life, they would have lived forever as people without any sickness. And as soon as they sinned and got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, suddenly there was sickness. There was all kinds of other things going on. God cursed the whole earth because of our sin. So while it's not accurate to say that every person is sick because of a sin in their lives, it is accurate to say that all sickness is because of sin. And there are penalties that we accrue from other generations, from other circumstances, that are because of sin that happened before we were even alive. But those penalties remain. So in the end, when anyone is healed at any point, the sin has to be removed. And that's not just the only problem. It's not just that the sin is removed and an atonement is given. There is no healing without an atonement. Once the sin is removed, God has to give you some kind of an atonement, because there are different levels of atonements. There has to be an atonement with God for the sin to be healed, or for the sickness to be healed. And if you don't understand this, you don't know how this works, then you should study your Bible. Learn what an atonement is and why God forgives the iniquity of that land in one day on the atonement. Why it is that the 7-year release and the 50-year release all occurred on atonement. Why God heals people on atonement. It's really important. It's really the shocking doctrine of the hour. And I mean that prophetically from the standpoint of the time that we're in. It is the most important thing that we should understand as far as doctrinal teachings go. The most important thing that we can understand at this point in God's plan. It really is. We've already gotten past the Passover. Everybody knows what the sacrifice of Christ was about. They don't understand it perfectly, but they understand it. Now we're in that circumstance where we need not only the Passover, but God's willing to give an atonement after the destruction of America. When the third kingdom begins, Isaiah 2, Micah 4, Daniel 2, when God establishes his kingdom on this earth, an atonement has to be given in Zechariah 3. And the iniquity of our land will be healed in one day. And there will be one church. And Ezekiel 34 will have been accomplished. And there will be one teacher with one set of doctrines. Read Ezekiel 34. Because that's when the new covenant really begins. It was conceived in Messiah's time, but nobody really laid their hands on it. And very soon, right after the destruction of America, approximately 42 months after the destruction of America, God's going to actually write his law and the fear of the Lord in our hearts and in our minds forever, as a group, as a whole, not as just a single person here and there. It's important that we understand the atonement. And it's important to understand why we don't have healing now, here, in this place, and everybody's dying like flies right and left. Christianity, everybody's so old, it's hard to believe. The churches are, there aren't many young people left. It's just a bunch of old geezers. And they're dying all over the place. They got cancer, they got all kinds of problems, and they're not getting healed. Why aren't they getting healed? Because it's not time yet. And some of them were faithful all their lives, and they're going to die before all of this happens. Because God's not going to put some of those people through this. And I'm not saying they're perfect, but there have been some faithful people that God's going to kill off before he destroys this whole place. But if you don't understand the sacrifice of the Messiah and the atonement, you don't understand the mechanism of your saving. You don't understand what's going on. You see, the Messiah was busy on Passover. He was busy being the sacrifice for us. He sacrificed himself for us on Passover. And he was busy doing that, did a great work, spectacular, perfect work. What does Christ do on atonement? As our high priest, he applies his own blood for us to bring us together with the Father. He's busy on atonement, offering his blood to the Father for us when we're accused by Satan. This is the only way we get in God's kingdom. You see, the Passover only gives us a temporary reprieve from death until that blood is applied on the atonement. If you don't understand this, clearly understand that this is how it is, and that Christ has a choice in whether or not he keeps you alive or not. If you don't understand this, you are going to be dismayed in the judgment. Because the Passover and the atonement are two halves of the same whole. And you don't get into God's kingdom with only half of it. It's like having the lock or the key, but not both. One or the other is not going to get you in. Both will. So know that when the Messiah touched this woman and her fever left her, he was addressing the sin completely, removing whatever sin it was, whether it was hers or somebody else's, or whether it was just simply a curse from when God cursed everybody. He dealt with that, and then he covered that sin before God. You can say, oh, well, that's the same thing. It was one operation. But no, there were really two things going on. We really need to understand what's going on around us and within us. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she rose and helped them. Pretty cool. And when evening was come, they brought many unto him that were possessed with devils, and he cast out spirits with his word and healed all that were sick. People that were absolute lunatics with demons that caused them to gibber and have all kinds of weird behaviors, which go look at a TV, you'll see them all over the place. And they're now, if you're autistic or something like that, you're some kind of a hero on the TV. And Christ was here casting out such things as often as he could. Cast out spirits with his word. His word, his authority. The word of the living God has power to stop these things. And you can believe that absolutely, categorically, without question or doubt. But that still doesn't mean that God's going to heal a lot of people and cast out devils when he has clearly said that no sign shall be given except for the sign of Jonah the prophet. If you're waiting for this, you should be aware that God's not likely to do that in this time. If we were back in New Testament times, he'd do it in a heartbeat. Boom. Show up in front of him and he'd be like, yeah, I'll heal you. But we're not in the same time. We're not in the same time. It's been 2,000 years since Christ planted that field. And when you look at the field now, 2,000 years later, what do you see? What do you see? Fields are already white to the harvest. They're ready to be harvested. But when you actually look at that field, what do you see? What I see is a little bit of grain that's been choked out by weeds and trees and bushes and shrubs and cactus. And you can hardly see the wheat in the field. Because of what? Because of the sin of all the people that are doing whatever they want. Because of the 100,000 different churches that are all sharing contradictory everything about God. Everything's contradictory. And they like it that way. Oh, we're not like those. Insert your own people that you don't like because they're not like you. 100,000 different churches. Not 100,000 different stalks of wheat that all look the same, but 100,000 different weird weeds that all are different. And that's not okay. God's not happy about that. This time is not like that time. You see, we've come to the end. We've come to Ezekiel 7. We've come to the end where God's going to stop everything. Have you read Revelation? At the end there, it gets to the point where a man is as the golden wedge of Ophir. And there's not many men left on the whole planet. Because he's killed off all of the weeds and burned all the chaff. And he's killed all the goats so that the sheep could live. You see, we're not in the same time as the Messiah was when he was here doing these various things. He came here to save. He came here to give us the whole world. And what have we done? We've stolen everything for ourselves, claiming the kingdom, and not behaving anything like what God said. Look at Matthew 5-7 and all the characteristics of what God said we should be like, and then look around at you at the world. And what do you see? You don't see what God described in Matthew 5-7 and Galatians 5. You don't see that. Which means something's got to change. Christ came giving us every good thing. And we've refused to just accept healing. We've just refused. We won't obey him. We won't do what he says because we have our own ideas about what's best. If you don't think that's true, if you think that's a lie, then you should look around at all these doctrines of all these different churches. They all have different ideas about what's best. And you're a part of that. You're responsible for that before God. And you should get out of that. Well, if we don't believe what we believe in church, what do we believe? Well, maybe you should form those opinions yourself based upon looking at the Bible honestly, reading it honestly, instead of just trying to find a way out, a fake rapture, or a place of safety, or something that separates you from everybody else so that you can make money off of God's people. Read Ezekiel 34, Jeremiah 33, lots of other places. Look up the word shepherds and do a word study. You'd be amazed at what God thinks about the ministry. He's not real happy with them. When evening was come, they brought many unto him that were possessed with devils, and he cast out spirits with his words and healed all that were sick. All that were sick. He could heal anyone at will. How many healings do you see today? There's some fakery. Maybe occasionally God still heals someone, but it's deteriorating quickly. Has been for years. It's been getting less and less and less as time has gone by, and our sin has been multiplied before God. He healed all that were sick, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. And he did that. He did that himself, and has done it through men of God for centuries. While we're in this time, while we're in this precious time of having a reprieve from death because of the Passover. But that reprieve from death is about to end. It's really about to end. The destruction of Babylon is going to be the end of that reprieve from death, the destruction of America. Verse 18. Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to depart unto the other side. The other side of what? Well, I haven't looked ahead, so it might be the Sea of Galilee, it might be the other side of the city, it might be the other side of the desert, it might be the other side of anything. The reality is there were a lot of people. And you know what? It's starting to stink around here. There's too many people pooping. We got to go somewhere else. It might have been 7,000 people. It might have been 35,000 people. We don't know. It doesn't say here specifically. But it was a lot of people. And when you put that many people on top of someone, it's difficult and they make a mess. And if Christ hadn't been continually moving around, it would have gotten really ugly. And a certain scribe came and said unto him, Master, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said unto him, The foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. This is a disturbing thing. Most people aren't disturbed by it because they don't understand what this means. But the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. What is he saying? When he says this, there's a meaning here. There's something important going on. What is important about the Son of Man not having a place to lay his head? Well, first off, it means he has a job. He has something specific he has to do, and he can't just go home and forget about it. The second thing is that he's saying, I am a stranger and a pilgrim. I am one of God's people, and I am a stranger and a pilgrim, and I have no home here. He was saying, my home is in heaven. My home is with the Father. And he was also, to a certain degree, lamenting the fact that he didn't have a place to stay every night that he could call his own. I'm not saying that was a sin or that was anything like that, but if you've ever been homeless, you know how important it is to have a home, to have a place that you can rest. But our Messiah came here to be restless and to serve us. And you know what? We haven't responded very well at all. This is prophetic in other ways too, but I don't feel like going into that right now. Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And another of his disciples said unto him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. You know what? My dad died and I need to go bury him. And to anyone who has even the slightest bit of understanding, this is a really, really harsh scripture. It's harsh. Another of his disciples said unto him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said unto him, Follow me and let the dead bury their dead. Wow. If this isn't a mind blower, then you aren't thinking about this correctly. This is your father, whom God says, Honor your father and mother, that your days be long upon the land. He died and is not buried. And the Messiah is saying, you know what? That's not nearly as important as I am. Forget about him. He's dead. Somebody will bury him. You should be paying attention to me right now. Wow. The Messiah was correct to say what he said. Absolutely 100% correct. But it's harsh. If you're the one whose father died just the day before, and somebody says, well, don't even bother, it doesn't make any difference. How many people can stand that saying? How many people can look that in the eye and say, okay, well, I will blow off my father who just died and I will follow God? This is harsh. This is really harsh. But you know what? This isn't very harsh at all. This circumstance isn't very harsh at all. I mean, it's harsh, but it's not really harsh at all. Why am I saying that? Why would someone who understands a lot of things about the Bible say that this actual circumstance isn't very harsh at all? Most people would look at that and say, wow, that's just, whoa, that's disrespectful. That's the blah, 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 blah. There'd be all kinds of things being said. What they don't get is that this right here is highly prophetic. Really, really highly prophetic. This is an important statement. And it brings me almost to tears just thinking about it because it's so important. The reality is that this was spoken for that moment about this much. And it's spoken for our moments completely. You see, at this moment, here, this is spoken in isolation. In this scripture, it's spoken in isolation. At that time, Christ was telling him, I'm more important than all this. But what he was telling us in this time is that you're going to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. and your father and your mother and your children and everyone around you is going to die around you, and you're going to have to choose what's important. You're going to have to follow me, follow God, in the face of the death of most of the people around you. And you're going to have to do this without getting lost. You're going to have to do this in a circumstance that's really difficult. This little thing that we're seeing right here, it was little. But when you're facing the destruction of America in totality, and God's very clear that he says that you will not be buried, you'll be like dung upon the face of the earth, and that the animals will eat your body, your dead bodies, and the people around you are dying like flies, every man into the hand of his neighbor and into the hand of his king, and there's civil war. And then the beast comes in and destroys the entire nation. You're going to have to walk through the valley of the shadow of death and keep your eye on God. And that's what this is referring to. It's not referring to anything else. At the time, it seemed, wow, that's harsh. Why? There was nothing going on. There was no major catastrophe. Why wouldn't you just go to this funeral and then go back to following God? Well, it wasn't spoken for that time. It was spoken for this time. I mean, it was important then. I'm not taking away from that. But that was spoken for this time when everybody's dying around you. And you have to choose whether you're going to sit there and mope about with some dead bodies that you can't have any effect on, or whether you're going to choose to follow God all the time through the valley of the shadow of death when 10,000 die on your right hand and 1,000 on your left. You need to be prepared for that mentally. You need to be prepared to follow God so that you're not one of those that dies as an evildoer, as a wicked man or woman. Jesus said, I'm going to follow me and let the dead bury their dead. Keep your eye on the ball. Pay attention to what's going on. Follow God and don't worry about everything else. That's what this is saying. And you should do that. And when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him. So we're going across the Sea of Galilee. And behold, there arose a great tempest in the seas, insomuch that the ship was covered with waves. But the Messiah was asleep. And his disciples came unto him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish, we're going to die. The wind's that bad, and the waves are big, and the boats are awash. And he said unto them, Why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. Why are you afraid, O ye of little faith? You should look up this phrase, O ye of little faith, because it's important. God says, great, tremendous faith. This guy, I didn't even have to walk over there. I could heal his servant from here. Because he believed that I would do it when I said I would do it. He believed the words coming out of my mouth. And then he's like, oh, you have little faith because they're afraid in a storm. How many people have been afraid in a storm? Pretty much everybody, if they had their brain set on straight, because we're afraid of things like that. Being physical humans, we're afraid of things like that. Wind blows real hard, lightning strikes, snow's 17 feet deep, lake effect or whatever, Sierras. You can get killed. I've been on boats a lot. I nearly died a number of times on boats. God brought me through it. Not saying I wasn't afraid, because it's scary. When you have 40-foot waves in front of you, it's scary. But why shouldn't you be scared of a storm when you're with the Messiah? It's real easy. He made the stars. He made the moon. He made the earth. He made trillions of galaxies. And the forces that are at work with all of these different things out there are unimaginable. They're unimaginable. When we go out there and we map the whole universe, we don't map it by planets or suns or even galaxies. When they're mapping the whole universe right now, they've got a bunch of satellites that are doing a variety of different things. They can map a lot of the universe. Guess what? A galaxy doesn't even fit on that scale. There are super galactic clusters, clusters of many galaxies, giant galaxies that show up on that map, but galaxies don't show up. Individual stars, not even close to showing up on something like that. God created all of this. And we are worried about some waves in the wind? In the presence of someone like that, we shouldn't be worried about anything like that. You see, God's the one who's in control of all of those things. What we should be worried about is, am I acting in God's will? Is God going to protect me because I'm following him and acting in his will? That's what you should be worried about. You should be afraid of God if you're not following him. You should be afraid of God if you are following him. Fear God and live. Fear God and not the destruction of your flesh. For by any means, whether it's old age, disease, or anything else, follow God. Walk in his will. And you will live forever. If you're walking in God's will, you have no need to fear a storm. And if you're walking in God's will enough that he grants you his Holy Spirit and power, then guess what? Miracles are not off the table in the slightest. But you will give no signs in this time. Because God said there shall be no sign given except for the sign of Jonah the prophet. And healings on the level that the Messiah was doing it, that's a sign. Healings like Peter was doing, where all his had to happen was his shadow had to cross someone who was sick and they would be healed. That's not going to happen now. The signs that we should be looking for are the signs of what the Messiah himself said about the end time. Throughout the Bible, all the words that he wrote in his Bible, we should be looking at his words, believing them in faith and understanding, knowing without question or doubt that it's going to happen the way he said. Yeah, they're stammering lips in another tongue. Yeah, it's difficult to understand. But you know what? It's quite possible to get there, regardless of what you or anyone else has told yourself. Oh, I just can't understand the prophets. I don't get it. I don't understand. Okay. Then maybe you need to change some things about yourself. Maybe you need to believe what God says when he says all those things that he says about his own people. He says such horrible things about us because of our sin. And if you don't believe those things that he says about us and take responsibility for your own sin before God in all the prophets, then of course you can't possibly see what the problem is. You won't understand what's going on in the prophets because you've said, "Oh, well, I'm not like that. I'm not a murderer. I don't do any of these horrible things. God's not yelling at me. He's not angry at me." As soon as you say that, you've blinded yourself completely from everything that's in the prophets. Can't understand them. You can't understand what the Messiah said when you do that. Why? Because you're a hypocrite. And the blind leading the blind, or being led by the blind. You believe all these ministers out here who are lying about God and about everything about him. Read Ezekiel 34. Of course you're not going to understand those things. How could you possibly if you're blind? So you need to start taking the blinders off. And to do that, the only way you can do that is to admit your sin, to accept your sin. And not just the little sins that you think you have, but all the big sins that God says are just absolutely rampant. When he says stuff like, well, all the tables are full of vomit and there is no place clean. You've got to explore what God says are your sins. You're a usurer. Almost everybody is a usurer. God says it's not okay to charge interest. It's not okay. And somebody will say, oh, well, you can charge interest to people who aren't Israelites, but you can't charge interest to Israelites according to God's law. Yeah. Okay. And yet God opened up salvation to all of the Gentiles. And now those Gentiles can be our brothers too. So should we then charge them interest? Might be a little bit hypocritical to charge anybody interest. You see, you've got to decide who you are and what you're going to be and whether you're going to follow God. Because God does not have any interest in your retirement fund. Stock market, it's just an open boil that God hates. And if you're involved in that, you have a lot of big sin that God's not interested in. Well, he's interested in it, but he's going to kill you for it. There's lots of other things. There's hundreds of other things. Unjust weights and balances. The US dollar is an unjust weight and balance. Fiat currency, all of it, is an unjust weight and balance. We have so many problems in this country, and we're not willing to address them. Having a mortgage is sin. Being a banker and charging usury and interest on everything around you is a horrifying thing that God hates. Hates it with a passion. Look up gain. Look up the word gain in the Bible. Gain is when you earn something that you don't deserve, that you didn't work for. You got any money in cryptocurrency? That's a sin that God's going to punish you for. Except you repent. All of this stuff are things that God's angry about. And it's not just that. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of other sins that we don't recognize. We look through the prophets and we read over all those sins and we just ignore them. We just ignore them because the language, I don't really understand exactly what that's saying, but we're not willing to go look and find out what God's pissed about. You see, God can be angry and sin not. He can kill everybody on this whole planet and not sin and not do anything wrong because he created us. And he asked us to do certain things, and we're like, no, forget that. There's no way I'm doing that. Adultery, fornication, sexual sin. Yeah, it's all over the place. up to our eyeballs. It's everywhere. You start listing off all of the sin, and God's just angry about all that because he said, don't act this way. Don't be this way. Be faithful. Walk in faith. I gave you all these commandments. I gave you all these laws, and now I've expanded them. I came and said, you know what? It's not that you're not supposed to commit adultery. You shouldn't look upon a woman to sin, to lust after her, because that's just as bad. And we're all like, no, we got to pitch this law business because, man, that hurts. There's no way we can manage that. And I say, okay, whatever, pitch the law. You can say it's pitched, but it's not going to pitch because it's God's sword. And it'll come back to kill you if you don't repent. Baptism, repentance. Stop sinning. At some point, if you do those things, God will make an atonement with you. You know, things will get better if you stop sinning. If you overcome. You know, where is overcoming in modern Christianity? Where is overcoming? Do people overcome in modern Christianity? Is that even possible? That's a head scratcher for sure. What are you overcoming? If there's no law, what are you overcoming? It's confusing. It really is. You look at all these churches with all these different doctrines, and you're like, wow, where exactly should I start this whole overcoming business, and what should I overcome? Should I overcome all the doctrines of this church, or all the doctrines of that church, or all the doctrines of... I can't figure out what I should be doing. They say this is good and that's bad, and they say that's bad and this is good, and I can't figure out what's what. You can't figure out what's what because you haven't been paying attention to God honestly, looking at his word and understanding it honestly. You see, everybody wants to take advantage, and everybody wants to be special. And all these doctrines that all these men have perpetrated upon us. It's scary. How does this relate to the faith? Our faith is in God. Our belief is in God, or should be. And if we believe him, we should believe his words like the centurion, and we don't have to worry about the winds. We don't have to worry about the destruction that's coming in a direct way, in that direct a way. We have to worry about it because God's not going to leave us unpunished. But let me tell you, you really should walk in faith. You really should do what you're supposed to do before God. Because if you don't, then when the winds come, you're going to be affected by them. You see, Christ tamed the winds because of the fear of his disciples. He was fine. He could have just stayed there and napped. The winds would have naturally calmed down when there was time, and they'd have gone to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and they'd have been fine. But his servants asked him to save them, and he did. Meanwhile, calling them, O ye of little faith. What are you thinking? The Lord of the whole earth and everything else is right here in this boat. You really think he's going to drown? And you with him? Not hardly. This should illustrate for us that we need to change our view of things, and that we should pay attention to God and not the things that are going on around us in our flesh. Focus on God. Keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on what's important. Don't worry about the dead people all around you. Focus on God and life. And believe Him in faith, regardless of the dead people, because they're all around you. And you should know it by their sin that they won't stop doing at all. And it gets worse and worse every day. Lord, save us, we perish. And he said unto them, Why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? And he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. But the men marveled, saying, What manner of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? The winds and the sea are nothing compared to intergalactic space and supergalactic clusters and all the things that are going on around us astronomically. A little wind on one small planet? That's nothing. Go out to Neptune, and the rain is made out of rubies and diamonds and stuff that would kill any person instantaneously if they happen to get in that rain. The forces that are happening on this earth are bigger than anything in the entire universe. And yet the earth itself is a dot of nothing within the universe. The forces that are at work on this planet that are bigger than anything else in the entire universe are because God is here working with us in this tiny little place. And his power is titanic, beyond our comprehension. And we need to place just a little bit of faith in that power, in him who wields all the power in the universe. Just a little faith. Because that's what he's looking for. That's what he wants, is belief in him, so that you can be saved and enter his kingdom, and you can be a part of his family. But you're not getting there unless you're walking in his will and willing to follow him wherever he goes, through whatever valley of shadow of death that you end up walking through. The winds and the sea obey God. Of course they do. So do the earthquakes and volcanoes and the planets around us, stars around us, all the galaxies, the heavens generally, all obey God. And he gave us this earth. Says the earth I'm going to give to men. The heavens, those are mine. You're not getting the heavens. You can have the earth. The heavens are mine. Read Psalms. God has power beyond anything that we can possibly imagine. So we should just find out who he is, learn who he is, and believe him. He's not lying to us. Satan's lying. Your minister's lying to you, whether he knows it or not. Believe God. Have faith in God, not your miserable little religion. Your miserable little sect that's just exactly like the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes and all the other ones of that time. We're a lot worse now than they were then. A lot worse. Horrifyingly, terrifyingly worse. They had a few hypocrites back then. We've got them by the boatload now. We all have choices to make. You should make yours.